I have a view that it's populism that is at the root of a lot of this polarisation. And what I mean by populism is a sense that increasingly political leaders tap into our fears and our angers and our emotions and find ways to articulate that through their political messaging. And I think that's far more prominent now than it was 10 years ago. But that is just a feeling for me. Am I right? Is there any evidence around the degree to which politicians are tapping more into identity, emotion, anger, feeling than before?
Well, I think there's always a slight tendency to look back on rose-tinted spectacles with your own, and I like to think that I always behaved in a great way when I was involved in politics, and I'm certain that's probably not true. I mean, I was a Liberal Democrat, which basically meant we weren't good enough at winning anything to do stuff on our own, so you had to kind of be nice to everybody.
Apart from by-elections, you were pretty good at by-elections.
I am. Yeah, I can be a totally ruthless when it comes to that. Yeah, and still retain an ability to think in that way. But I think there is undoubtedly some truth that the general climate has become more polarized and more hostile. The thing is that polarization sort of begets further polarization once you hit to a certain stage, because it rewards you. Like, you think, well, how do I get out my core vote? Well, I play to them a bit more. Or how do I depress the other party's vote? Well, I do that and I expose these things. And, like, that can be what happens. And then, once people start, for example, once it becomes really useful for a business to be like, well, it's a really good marketing strategy. I can identify a really good segment of who I'm talking to based on their political affiliation. Then you start to get other people reinforcing it. When you get to like when technology enables people to talk to people relentlessly across many channels all of the time, not just at elections when you would naturally expect polarization levels to increase for a good reason, people want a choice and a distinction between what's going on, like that can become a really big issue. People often ask me if we are the most polarized we have ever been and the answer to that is no. My publishers would love me to say yes, I would sell a lot more books if I did that. And there's people out here in the US who do it. But, we have previously fought wars. Things have become violent. I'd say that's pretty ignorant of history if you think that the most polarized we are is where we're at now. Does that mean that we're in a good place? No, it does not mean we're in a good place. Does it mean that the chances of violence increase? Yes. Again, I think, we're a long way from that point. There's still a lot of norms of behavior and institutions that act to safeguard us. But, as the more you rely on those and politicize those, you can end up in quite a slippery slope quite quickly. And you can get what, political scientists call democratic backsliding happening. Hungary is a really good example of where that's been going on. Poland to a certain extent. As well, and of course Turkey within Europe or the EU, depending on how you want to define that. But does it mean that is inevitable in the UK? No, it doesn't. I think there's a broader thing playing out at the minute, which is, first, before you hit that, you get civil disobedience. And when people think that things aren't fair or they're being screwed over by another group, a have against a have not, then you get what's called resource scarcity, to use the posh term, i.e. there's not enough to go around, basically. Sometimes people collaborate, often they become more likely to fight. And to hostility levels and polarization levels increase. So given the cost of living crisis, which is happening across Europe, and for which the Conservative government undoubtedly bears quite a bit of responsibility, particularly Liz Truss, but there are elements of the energy crisis that are not down to them, you would expect polarization levels to increase, because when people can't heat their homes or feed their kids, they tend to get pretty angry about it, and you tend to get high degrees of civil disobedience. And the poll that we'll be releasing in a week or two's time shows that there's quite a lot of support for people engaging in civil disobedience, not necessarily violence disobedience, but for strikes, for non-payment of bills, for all of that kind of stuff. That's there. And I think the odds are, as a consequence, that polarization will get worse before it gets better. But it should. And history does teach us that it should get better, provided people like you and hopefully people like me do their work and protect the institutions and norms of behavior that, stop us spiraling.